Brandon.
Thank you. Tonight, we were hoping to get through at least 2 chapters, although I think I sent you out all the material that had been distributed by Peter Johnston and Associates regarding the comprehensive plan update. The first item that I'd like to just touch on is the community profile, which corresponds to the section 1 in the original 2014 comprehensive plan. So I did a quick review of it today, made comments. I'm handing out my comments regarding this particular chapter, which included an executive summary and then a follow-up document, which provided more detail. And the executive summary kind of just makes some of the high points that came from the other attached document. But very briefly, he discusses our declining or slow growth rate and emphasizes that a lot, which I took somewhat of an issue with, because really we have been growing in the past 3 to 5 years. And I think it provides a different picture of, Pocomoke's growth situation. It's been a positive thing, not necessarily a negative thing, that we're not keeping up with the growth rate of the county. The county is such a weird county in some respects because of Ocean City and that growth giant, that we are never going to be able to potentially keep up with the growth rate of Ocean City and the county in that context. So I just point out that there's positive things going on with our growth. We've increased over the past 4 years. So I just want to, and I talked to him briefly on the phone about that. It's like, do we really need to overemphasize a declining rate of growth on an annual basis?
It's not fair to lump us in with Ocean City because Ocean City has explosive growth because of what Ocean City is.
And that's a potentially fault I find throughout his entire analysis on this community profile, where he compares Pocomoke City to Worcester County and the state. But he offers, maybe he's planning on going into it a little deeper, but he offers very little trend research in terms of a lot of the topics that he explores in the community profiles, such as age demographics, gender distribution, racial diversity, and so forth. But the meat of the document then starts on the category called Section 1 Community Profile. And just some little things, again, that I made notes on. Table 1s, for example, is mislabeled. He talks again about the population growth at the city as a percentage of the county population. It is what it is. I mean, it's, we're never going to be probably much more than an 8% of the population or the growth rate of the county. And that's just the way it is. So then on page 3, for example, he goes into more detail.
That even when I look at myself, a lot of the data concerning me has changed since when we did the census. For instance, bachelor degree, there's disparity. I have greater, in a couple, 17 days, I will have greater than a bachelor's degree, right? Also, I've changed addresses, I've moved. That's another thing. So I feel like this data, and that's why when we first started this, I really wanted fillers to actually be out for people to actually fill out, because the census data isn't 100% accurate. Even when we look at our racial diversity, right? We know that this isn't accurate. This is based on census data. How many people actually did the census data? I just wish that we could have still put something out so we could get more accurate numbers, so we could have combined numbers, because our comprehensive plan is going to be what leads the city and what sells the city.
Did we do something on the, even though probably I don't know how many people have responded, didn't we put something on the Facebook, on the website for?
Well, we're encouraging public feedback. I think it'd be very difficult to get an accurate number or representation of the city's population or racial composition by sending out surveys. The best we can do is census, I think, in that regard, but certainly getting input on topics and future directions and what we want to see and that's very important. But I don't think we can ever go beyond what the census has done in terms of actual data on who we are, what we are, how many of us and so forth, but it's always a possibility, I guess.
I mean, I can see a little bit of just in X amount of years, what has, someplace like Hardwire brought into the town employee-wise that, follow whatever they are?
And that's my point. He doesn't go into these trends as far as, for example, employment by industry category.
Well, it's
How
not
fast
that
have we-
how many people, since this information, was obtained, have moved to Pocono. And they're XYZ, they've got degrees that, they don't have degrees, they hang from the ceiling, I don't really care, but they, somehow, it does shed some light on it, on change that may or may not have taken place.
Yeah, and
With
that's,
some people, and I cannot believe that with Hardwire in Kokomo, that hasn't, just alone hasn't changed for more diversity than it was, for one reason or another. I mean, I can't believe it, that none of them work here, I mean, none of them live here in
I think
Kokomo. that
Dan's
work-
asking for that, miss. He's asking for trends and comparisons for industry and
But see,
occupation.
I don't look at it as a trend, it's a reality, there,
Right.
I mean, it's
Well-
not something that's gonna,
yeah,
it's just
Hardwire affects us certainly.
It's a reality, he's here, he's employees, continually hiring, and
Well,
it's gonna be nothing but grow as far as I can tell.
but I guess
So
like,
it's not really a trend per se, it's, we need to know that information, I would think.
Well, related to that, and it goes into more detail toward the end of the document, is, for example, what is our employment composition in the town? How many people are in the retail or in manufacturing or in service or in public administration? So he's got some gaps in that data, but it would be helpful to know how fast we're growing in certain sectors, whether or not it's a trend or not. I think that is good information, but he doesn't go into any kind of historical trend analysis as far as like, well, how many more jobs in manufacturing do we have since 2020 or 2010? You know, are there trends? And I think that's relevant, but
I mean, it's funny when I, as I call it, touring the compound. My God. I'll see vehicles that I see all the time, whether it's, a Tractor Supply or whatever, and I'll drive by, like the Hardwire up there, on Broad Street, and I go, they work there. I see them around town, and then I see their vehicle at, is it Bertelli's?
Vanilli's.
Bertelli's is possibly listed. Or not, thanks.
And-
But I'm just making that I'm just using that as an example, I get pretty surprised that, well, they must live in Kokomo too,
Well, there's data in this community profile on how many people drive out of the county to work and so forth, and that's informative, but it does provide a community profile. But again, unless you see trends, does it really impact? Or
is there something that we could do with just the businesses to take, say, hey, how many people, that work here, live in Kokomo?
why would we need that? I mean, it's good information, but
Number one, if someplace like Hardwire is growing, is that gonna be, as you use the word trend, that more people
Yeah,
are gonna be
yeah.
looking at Hardwire?
yeah, so
And
that's,
therefore be living.
employment drives,
They didn't,
certainly employment drives housing. More jobs that are created, more housing that's going to be needed, and that's why it's important to know, well, we've got an upward trend here. We're gonna have more jobs in 2030 if we keep this projection up. We're gonna need more housing units and more school room.
it's whether it's more housing, you've got all these employees, I'm used to coming out of a business and I'm gonna walk down so-and-so and have lunch. I mean, it's the whole scope of it, it's, people can only go to 3 or 4 places for lunch all the time, so it kind of gives me an idea that, oh, wow, we've got quite a bit of, people that work, that this particular business that live in Pocono, or, and they wanna go for lunch, they wanna stop and get dinner on their way home.
One of the reasons why we are, one of our downfalls, in attracting business is that we are labeled a bedroom community. And because we're labeled a bedroom community, and for people that don't know what a bedroom community is, it's basically we just live here to sleep. We do everything else outside of Pocono. And so what business would come to a town that has been labeled a bedroom community when what it's basically saying is it's no point in you building another grocery store here because they're going to shop in Salisbury. It's no point in you building more restaurants here because they're going to eat on their way home. We need to rebrand that within our comprehensive plan that
I
does
think as
not.
we have, somebody has mentioned, you have the idea of the live, work, and play mindset going forward. That we're just not, a bedroom community that everybody works 30 minutes away and
That is,
by the time they get home, they're done for the day.
that is a trend that he points out in the data, in that there are more people now commuting outside the county to employment versus what there was in 2010. But is that unusual or not? That's.
But here's another trend, right? People are moving, people are taking jobs closer to home now than what we were in 2020. Because when COVID came, it showed us, hey, I got a pretty decent community that I live in. So even people like me that drove an hour and 15 minutes for work each day, I said, I gotta get a job closer to home. Maybe not in Pocono, but closer to home. And the reality is, I'm no longer contributing to the bedroom-esh of Pocono City because between Pocono and Princess Anne, there's no point in me stopping for gas. There's no point in me grocery shopping there. There's no gym for me to join in Princess Anne. So I think that that trend particularly is changing. We just need some data to support it because these companies are going to look at our comprehensive plan. And that is going to be the determining factor, whether they give us a chance just today at lunch that you missed. But we excuse you this time.
I needed the time, sorry.
Just today, someone said, I want a Chick-fil-A. That's great. We all want a Chick-fil-A, but does Chick-fil-A believe that they can sustain in a community where people literally only go to sleep? And here's the thing, distance-wise between Chick-fil-A's, Pocono would be an ideal location to have one because the closest one to us is in the mall at Salisbury, and then we've got one out on the north end of Salisbury, then there's one in West OC. Pocono would be the great place for, but do they believe that they can sustain? We need our comprehensive plan to show that these businesses can sustain here.
It's two or three things.
Not by travelers, but by the residents.
Yeah, there's two or three things that help support economic development, at least from my experience, and that is vehicles going by that place, your general level of disposable income, and population growth. You say a negative declining city, they're going to turn around and say, well, I'm not sure I want to locate there. So, those are important considerations though. So.
I agree with much of your comments that are about the trending and the comparisons to Worcester County being almost harmful to our comprehensive plan because Ocean City is such a unique case, and I really need to see trends for some of this stuff, like looking at the median income and the mean income, having that broken down a little better, not just against Worcester County and Maryland, but maybe a community of our size. Like, how are we doing as compared to other small communities similar to us? And
Well, you can stay within the county, Snow Hill, Berlin, versus the other.
Again, Berlin, you're talking about Berlin.
Sure, but Snow Hill is a good example,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example on that topic. For example, on page 9, they talk about table 12, income and poverty. Well, they obviously show our median household income, for example, is $30,909 compared to Worcester County of $57,474. But they make the point that it's going up faster in terms of the past decade or so than what possibly Worcester County and other places are. So while we are starting from behind in that category, we're increasing at a faster rate.
It seems like the emphasis is on the table versus the.
I think everybody bites the bullet as far as Ocean City goes, just, they have a problem with when they're trying to do their crime rate and they get stuck with the summertime influx of people, you know, when their crime rate is really, really high for the year. So they get nailed and they try to make everybody understand and say, oh, no, it's not this crime in town, it's because we have 400,000 people in town for 3 or 4 months,
I think
when our population is really only 10,000 people.
and the
So
flip
they're
side of
all
that though,
down. So we would be in that same boat per se on a different subject because of the population being small. So everybody feels the effects one way or the other.
but looking at this plan, I mean, like if I'm a business looking to locate in the area, like similar to what the mayor's saying, like I'm gonna be like, okay, well, where else in Worcester County is all this good stuff happening? Let me put my business there, not in Pocomoke, because Pocomoke's doing worse than the county. Like
This
it's,
is like doom and gloom.
and it's not, and it's just not true. Like it's not representative.
So for example, we have more people in manufacturing and employment than the county does, 7% versus 5%.
But the like trending, so and to go back to the thing you were saying earlier, like is this a standard table of industry and employment? Because like a professional, scientific, and management, administrative, and waste management services, that seems like a very broad brush. And specifically here, I'd like to see the relative of defense and aerospace and the percentage growth there is there, because
Yeah.
that's a major industry here. At least I think it is, but I'd like to see the data.
Well, and that was my first point. In the 2014 plan, he points out, he gives a regional context about who we are on the Delmarva Peninsula. And then on the first page of the community profile, he also talks about the potential explosive growth of Wallops Island. But he doesn't mention that at all in the rest of the community profile. He may mention it in other chapters, I'm not sure, but so there's no reference as far as how Wallops Island and how it has impacted us. And one of the suggestions I make is that can we get a little more research on what the economic impact has been on our community and or Worcester County in general to include that in the comprehensive plan, because that's a positive story. And that has fueled the demand for housing in the community, so.
Again, man, I want to read. I hope that you all have seen this. Pocomoke City, Maryland, where small town charm meets bold vision. Are you a dynamic, innovative leader ready to help shape the future of a thriving city on Maryland's Eastern Shore? Pocomoke City is seeking a visionary city manager who brings not only experience and integrity, but also true passion for community transformation. Why Pocomoke City? Nestled in the heart of the Salisbury metropolitan area, Pocomoke City is a scenic, welcoming town rich in history and bursting with potential. Nicknamed the friendliest town on the Eastern Shore, we offer the perfect blend of small town charm and regional accessibility. Located just 35 minutes from Ocean City, Maryland, and 30 minutes from Chincoteague, Virginia, Pocomoke sits directly between two of the East Coast's most beautiful beach destinations. We have rehabilitated buildings not only in our historic district, but also in neighborhoods across the city, honoring our past while building for the future. We're home to Hardwire LLC, one of the nation's top armor companies serving the federal government and military. And on a clear night, you might catch a glimpse of a rocket launch from NASA Wallops flight facility just over the state line. Most of all, Pocomoke City is a city of beautiful people, neighbors who deeply care, serve proudly, and welcome new leaders with open arms. Pocomoke isn't just a place to work, it's a place to live, lead, and leave a legacy. And that is what we need everything to say. We need everything to sell us. That doesn't sell us. There was a reason why I posted about the Newberry building, because I already knew my answer to it last week. Is Pocomoke still a centralized hub for towns like Princess Anne, Snow Hill, Chrisfield, our surrounding towns? The answer is yes, and we always have been. Think about all of those people that commented on the post about the Newberry building or JJ Newberry's that have never lived in Pocomoke. They came here. They were shopping here. How many times do we go to Walmart and we see people that we do not recognize? You've never seen them before in your life. Every time you go, because we are still the centralized hub, and we need to capitalize on being there. When someone reads this, it sounds like we're a dying town, that we are less fortunate, and we have nothing to offer. Community profile, put it in. Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Well,
about.
and the data supports a lot of those points, like, so.
It does.
So
The reality.
this is a very, almost like a generic template that has been applied to us that doesn't fit the uniqueness of who we are,
And it's
I
it's
guess.
a great building block from there to sort of start in turn asking the questions. Not to say that anybody's going back to square A again, but you could take that and you can expand from that for this particular town and staying within the Snow Hill, staying within Worcester County, let's say. Rather than having to go into Somerset County or even Wycomico County, you still stay within that Worcester County block. Just that, you know, we just have different, every town has different offerings. And we have great offerings, we have great offerings. We have more offerings than Snow Hill,
Right.
in
And we
my opinion. I mean, even Snow Hill has to come here to the Walmart,
Mhm.
you know, we've got it.
And someone talked about all of the dilapidated buildings in Snow Hill just this morning, last night-ish. That is not our struggle anymore. Really, when we ride through Pocomoke, most of these houses have been fixed up. We tore down the Armory, we tore down Willow Street. That was two of the biggest eyesores. While I still wish that the library was going down here, it's not, it's going up there. You can tell that it's going to look fantastic.
It is, and you know, and it's, yeah, everybody maybe wished it was over there, but you know what, there's something about driving on Market Street, and when you come up on that new library, it's just gonna be, wow. And more people see it from, on Market Street than they do, you know, over there. Granted, it's a beautiful location there as well, but, you know, it's just like, you know, sometimes when you come up against some of these houses on Market Street decorated at Christmas time, you go,
Right.
wow. It does, it's gonna have a wow factor.
And this is my last thing. That is our job posting for the city manager. Of course, it goes deeper into the qualifications and everything like that. The historic trend shows that typically when we post, now, of course, there are some external factors that make this time a little bit different. But historically, when we post a job announcement, we struggle to get 10 applicants. Monday night, I reported that we had 7 applicants. We've officially got 10, and it hasn't even been 2 weeks yet. It's all in what we say to pull people in. And that job posting makes people believe that this is the best little small
But
town.
it's not, and I don't think you're sugarcoating anything.
Right,
You know how sometimes you put a little fluff on it and everybody's happy. That's the truth. I mean, what you have written in your introduction about Pocomoke, I mean, it's true. It's true. There's nothing sugarcoated about it. Every point you made is.
and personally for me, I don't care for racial demographics to be in our community. If it was one thing that I could take out completely, it's that.
I mean, on that point, and I just. When people do that, the point of that is what?
Well, it has
Whether it's white, black, Asian,
Well, give you an example. It does have implications, for example, with our school population. I did an analysis of our school population growth. The increase in population in the schools didn't come from the growth in the white and the African American Black categories. It came from the other ethnic categories such as the Latinos and Haitians. So it does have an implication on how we're growing. So we recognize what those trends are, what the needs are.
I would rather something that says everyone is welcome here.
Well, it's, you know, sometimes that's the school, that's a problem the school has. If we were someplace larger that had, like, it was sort of like Embassy Go, where, you know, the kids went to public school for half a day and went to their classes on Embassy grounds in the afternoon or the morning, however, which way they did it. But they were learning English. So you had some that were fluent in English, some that weren't so good. So the schools needed to know that information coming in. What shade their skin was made no difference. It was just.
Well, I think it's important to show what our demographic profile is, but I don't think we need to, go.
But then when I look at this demographic profile, you wanna know what it screams to me? Oh, there's a racial divide in the city. All three of these people could call me at any time if they needed something, and I would be right there. Not because of the color of either of our skin, but because I value them. And when we see 41% Black and 47% white, it screams racial division, and that is not the case.
No, I just don't see the point in it. I never have.
Well, we can take it out. Yes.
I grew up in a neighborhood that, like the United Nations.
Do business analysts look for that kind of thing, though? Would its absence necessarily cause someone to look away because they don't have a level of detail to like Starbucks, right? Starbucks, are they looking at racial demographics before they locate into a community? If the answer is no, then we don't need it.
No, they're looking at the more of the income, educational backgrounds, those kinds of.
How many people are gonna
that are
check their
gonna-
iPhone?
They're either gonna make money or they're not gonna make money. I don't care if you swing from the chandelier naked. Can you afford? If I couldn't make money.
Several categories.
That's all that matters.
Several categories in the community profile, such as age, such as racial composition, such as senior citizens, all those categories and poverty rates, so on.
Senior citizens is one thing because we require different, more medical care, et cetera, et cetera. You know, nowadays it really doesn't even,
Well,
it remember once or
what
again,
he-
just a sick.
What he is doing is following the 2014.
I think it's very old
format.
school.
It doesn't necessarily have to follow the 2014 format, but that is what he's attempting.
Is there a level of requirement from the state for content of this?
No.
So I guess one big thing.
Well, there are requirements that you have to address.
I agree with pretty much every comment that I see handwritten in here, which I'm assuming are all your comments. But the one thing, like, Worcester County has their own comprehensive plan, right?
All towns should.
Would it not be appropriate for us to take out, like, because I feel like the Worcester County data is detrimental to the picture painted for our city. Would it be appropriate to remove that stuff and focus in, so a lot of your questions are about trends. So focus in on Pocomoke City trends. What's the trending for Pocomoke City? The industries, the businesses, the income, those things. And also to pull in some of the elements like from the city manager posting of, the community profile should profile our community. Worcester County, Ocean City is not our community. Like it doesn't tell anything of the story of what's going on in
And
Pocomoke
they should
City.
be saying the same thing about us with this continent looking the way it does.
We probably bring it, I guess.
I'm just saying.
So what I'm hearing is that suggest to him, just focus on the important trends, not necessarily follow the format of the 2014 plan, I guess. But kind of what I'm hearing.
Well,
Go ahead, Jim.
Well,
This
and
is y'all's.
also specificity of things specific, so like the defense and aerospace industries, and also when we're talking about, where was this section? Industry and occupation, key industries, I mean, you comment on that, dominant sectors being educational services, health. But where is the discussion of, how many businesses are gained and lost? Like, what kind of businesses are we opening here? How are they succeeding? How long are they lasting? What's the medium, are businesses more successful to open here? Because there's like, if you make it, there's a rule of thumb, you make it through 5 years, you made it. But are businesses becoming more successful? Like that kind of trending. So how many businesses are opening a year? Cause you should have business license data for that, right? Like, could he pull from that kind of thing? The specific things of what's the likelihood of a business succeeding here is the point of the community profile, right? Like, and what's the likelihood of your family succeeding here if you choose to move here? And you're not really getting that.
Yeah, that's a good point about localized data that we have available, such as business license issued every year, or, number of single-family dwelling unit permits that we've issued over the past 10 years. I mean, that type of local data doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, we're sort of, Pocomoke sort of is, we're talking apples and oranges if we stay within Worcester County, that Pocomoke is unique and it has its own thing going on. And probably every town has, Ocean City has their own thing going on, Berlin has their own thing going on.
Vacancy rate, like, and how do you
And
quantify like our downtown going from, I mean, majority vacant to now being majority occupied? Like, that kind of thing, it's not present here, but that's a very positive story and a very positive indicator of our community.
Yeah, that's true. I think we could focus a little more on the reality of what's happening versus census data and trend data.
I mean, even when we look at the overall employees for Pocomoke City, right? Trends have really changed since 2020. When we look at the mayor and council, trends have changed since 2020. In 2020, there were only 2 people on the city council that were under the age of 35. Now,
y'all went behind the ears.
it's 4 of us, right? So these are the trends that we want to highlight, but we also want to talk about how we're able to all collectively work together, where there's no big I and there's no little U's, and that Miss Diane and CL's opinions are just as important as ours, even though they were, adults long before I was born.
I was wondering how you were gonna get around that little level.
More experience.
Bibbidi bobbidi boo. But
Probably.
we want to talk about those things that are extremely relevant to our town.
Yeah, I totally agree. We really need to focus on Pocomoke.
Well, remember, we have different chapters. We got a community profile chapter, we got a housing chapter, we got a land use chapter.
And that's a totally different category, but.
Worcester County does not represent our community. We are our own
Yeah.
community, I think is the main point, right?
I think, and once we keep that train of thought and keep that focus, the rest of the different chapters, will flow a lot easier.
Because the land use
And
plan
make more
doesn't,
sense to Pocomoke.
land use doesn't talk, so when we move into land use, that doesn't talk anything about Worcester County, right? Like, I mean, it's how are we using our land here? Maybe compared to like some of the rules in the
I think
state.
as you stated in the very beginning, it's a very generic and we
Okay,
just
are we
change
ready
the
to go
character.
into land use discussion?
Well, you get talking about industry, we're the only ones in the county that has industrial zoning, right?
We've got more industrial.
There's no one else in the county that has industrial zoning. We're the only ones.
I can tell you this, Pocomoke has been the only town that has been approached in Worcester County outside of Ocean City about one of the licensures for, marijuana. Literally, we were contacted yesterday.
Is it considered industrial?
Yes.
That
There's
would
very
be-
strict
that-
zoning.
That
So
would be
there's
why.
2 different types of licenses that you can get. You can get industrial, it's industrial, dispensary, and it's one more. Can't think of it.
Farm? No.
Farming, there we
Yeah.
go, there we go.
Did you say farming?
Yeah.
Farming, industrial dispensary,
Farming doesn't come under the.
farming.
I don't think so.
I'm just thinking of one up on Peerless Road.
Well, that's
It's a little bit of both, but they do it indoors.
It's a very important consideration, is to look at our land use map, land use plan, and give recommendations to those parcels either right now that are zoned or not zoned residential, commercial, or industrial, and give future direction to that. And also look at the land parcels just outside our borders that may have annexation potential, and what those recommendations should be. And the county has actually got a map I'm going to distribute showing these growth areas, the ready to move into that discussion, we can do that right now. Anything else on community profile?
Yeah, that'd be cool if we went for like a median, like trend on each specific thing, kind of what Chip was saying. So you can really see that trend over the years versus going against the county and.
Well, you did a lot better job in the 2014 plan than what I see in this.
Because,
Some radical changes of.
I mean, think about all the people that were ready to picket when that development was going to be built over by the high school.
Right, ready to jump into that topic?
Nobody cared about being down here though.
Right, no,
All right, let's go to the land use, handout.
There was actually two. One's called this Land Use in Pocono City, a background report for the comprehensive plan, which was largely, using a planning term, fluff. There really was no meat to it at all, no specific recommendations other than saying, we're gonna develop a whole new approach to zoning. I didn't think it was actually worth reading after I read through it once.
I don't know that that helps us, right? Like saying, hey, totally, here's a completely new way to do this, do it this way. Instead of
It's
taking.
just very repetitive. It talks in its goals and virtues of infill development, using a new approach to zoning, and how it's gonna be a tremendous benefit to the city, and it's gonna be sustainable, on and on and on. That doesn't have really any meat to it. The one document there, he starts to go into more specific as far as the future direction for the land use plan, is this document called Land Use Plan Introduction.
Dan, where's the microphone?
so then the other thing, right, when we look at the Board of Planning and Zoning, only one person on the Board of Planning and Zoning lives in our sustainable community. That's Jessamine. Nola doesn't live in it, Chip doesn't live in it, Steve doesn't live in it, and who's blessed, what's his name, Michael. None of them live in the sustainable community. We've talked about, excuse me, expanding the sustainable community, but where it stands, Jasmine would be the only one that lives in the sustainable community. So when we say, sustainability land use will minimize environmental impacts, conserve resources, and promote long-term resilience, that's not true. That's only true for the area that Jasmine is in. It's not true for Nola's neighborhood. It's not true for Chip's neighborhood. It's not true for mine. Think about how close I live to City Hall. Not true for mine.
I think in the context of what he's saying in the document, is using that term sustainable in a broad context, but we do have that sustainable plan that demarks certain areas of the city. But I think he's applying it to a broader sense about how we should all develop sustainably, and that context is how I read it, but, yeah, we have talked about amending those boundaries, which is important too. But anyhow, what he is suggesting is somewhat of a departure from what we call traditional zoning. And he's got these guiding principles on page 1: sustainability, efficiency, equity, community character. You know, those are all context appropriate change, fiscal responsibility. Those are all great goals and objectives. He wants to promote infill development, diversify housing options, manage gentrification, enhance community engagement, modernize zoning regulations, optimize infrastructure, protect environmental resources. Again, those are all great objectives. Nobody would argue probably against those. So what he's proposing, though, is somewhat of a change in terms of how we approach achieving those goals. And what he has developed is a concept called transects, which is really just a fancy word for just dividing up the city into different zones again. And he creates basically 6 categories called T1, central business, T2,
core neighborhoods, T3 fringe neighborhoods, T4 suburban, an SDC special district commercial, and an SDI special district industrial. And what he's done is reorganize those boundaries within, say, the T1 zone, the central business district, the T2 core neighborhood, which reflects most of our smaller lots that were built over time from 1900 on to 1960 or so.
B1 and R2.
Yeah, and then the T2 would be more reflective of White Oaks and the Heights, for example, in that pattern of development. Your T4 would be more of your large lot suburban residential, such as Jenkins Orchard, for example. So he redefines these broad zoning districts into these, what he called transects. Again, that's just a fancy planning term for different zoning districts. But what he does suggest then is promoting additional ideas to incorporate higher densities, a more diverse range of housing types, and more flexible zoning standards to encourage development in a broad range of development within each of those 4 residential transects. And this is somewhat a radical approach. It's not necessarily unique to what's going on in the country, but what he's promoting essentially is the concept of allowing middle housing, the missing middle housing. He uses this term a lot. Townhouses, apartments, 4 family units, accessory dwelling units, those type of dwelling units that are more affordable than versus traditional single family residential development. So this is a concept that he is promoting. And again, this is not just his idea, it's nationwide as far as some of these ideas that are being floated about of incorporating flexible land use and zoning standards into these 4 residential transects or 4 different zones. So it's somewhat of a radical approach, and the devil is in the details. So these are all broad goals to encourage more affordable housing, allow more diverse housing, prevent gentrification, and so on and so forth. To take advantage of the infrastructure that we already have in place. All that's great, but this is a very different approach that would encourage more different types of residential development throughout all of these 4 zones. Now, having said that, we do have some flexible standards already built into the zoning code, which allow non-conforming lots to be built upon. For example, as we discussed at a recent zoning meeting, under the R2 zoning, the minimum square footage is 8,000 square feet for a new residential lot in the R2 zone. Well, the majority of lots in our older part of our neighborhoods are all 40 feet, 50 feet, 35 feet, and so forth. So they don't meet the standards now, but we do allow flexibility in rebuilding on those lots that had been previously built upon. So then the question is, well, okay, we're accomplishing infill development in that manner, but do we want to start allowing these middle missing housing types to also be encouraged in these transit zones? And that's a big question that you, the planning commission, the city council, and the mayor have to decide if that's the direction you want to go in.
So this is kind of frustrating to read because it's like, here's a whole new plan for how you can do this versus like I'm reading like we touched on it as you were talking. It seems like we could tweak some of our existing zones and accomplish many of these same goals without a radical overhaul. So like the C1 central business is very similar to our B1. The primary difference being we don't allow first floor residential in our B1, which I don't know that we would want to. But we allow second floor and a developer could build, like what Davis Strategic has been doing with older, larger buildings and planning to do, developer can provide housing on the second floor. So and then you go into, I think what's being talked about in the T2 and even the T3 here, we have a lot of R2 with the smaller lots. I think that as we continually end up, in these conflicts in the R2 specifically, the R2 should likely be reevaluated to accomplish some of these goals, but it needs to be done carefully because as I've been a very vocal advocate about, some of these concepts, if they are not written with specificity for positive growth, they have done significant damage in this town in the past, right? Like if you allow a single family home to be remodeled into 3 or 4 apartments, it has, maybe that works some places, it has never worked here. It has only declined property values and the quality of the housing stock, right? But why, like the case with the duplex that we have, right? Would a duplex with an owner occupying one of the units really be harmful to a neighborhood? With an owner occupied unit, you are likely not to have a decline in the quality of the property, right? So, or even townhouses, individually owned townhouses, which we're allowing because we're fortunate to have R3 right down here, by the river. Those will be individually owned, in some cases owner occupied, some of them will likely be rentals, right? Which fills that missing middle. So what I wish this section was, and I don't know if, you know, it's within the scope of the way the contract is written, is why can't we assess our existing zoning code and have him go through and look at these areas of modern practices and improvements to our code without suggesting an entire radical overhaul? Because it's not, I don't even see where he's suggesting where to use these zones, right? Like, it's just, like,
He's just giving you a fancy name.
I could have pulled this from, I could have written this, right? Like, I could have gone in and asked ChatGPT to tell me what zoning codes are the best for a modern
Yeah,
plan.
I agree with that. I think it does a better job in a sense of redrawing some boundaries around our old neighborhoods and putting them in a different class versus the next category up and the next category up. I think that should be looked at.
Is he suggesting a map? That, I guess I'm missing that. Oh, okay, that's like,
Yeah, and I've got a better.
it's grayscale, yeah, it's.
They've pretty much given it a fancy name with
We better
fancy
call it now.
wording, still meaning the same thing. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So expanding the B one essentially.
We already know.
Well, and this is kind of exactly like some, yeah, it's that challenge of what's allowed in B1s and R2s, and he's kind of shifting the boundary a little bit there. Okay, yeah, this picture does put it in a lot better context than the grayscale.
I think it's a good point.
I don't know.
I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but I think revising our boundaries a little bit, tweaking our zoning code, but the big question is, will the city want to encourage more diverse housing types? And he suggests across all these 4 different transects or zoning, residential zoning categories, and that's just something that you all gotta decide and give some direction on and let the council decide.
I think we gotta allow he's suggesting ADUs, we gotta allow ADUs, that seems to be like, that's gonna come,
Yeah.
I feel that's gonna come from the state.
Yeah, he says allow ADUs,
Yeah, it's.
allow
coming.
accessory dwelling units in all 4 residential categories. Well, maybe that could be sold to the public and the mayor and city council to support that. Allow townhouses or duplexes in all zones. Well, I don't know.
Mhm.
3plexes, 4plexes. They use this concept cottage courts. I don't even know what that is. Cottage
Is
court.
that like those small, like what they have over in Chincoteague, some of those small rental communities where you can rent a cottage?
Could be. Or it could be what we have on, I think, the 6th Street, where you got 4 little block houses on one
Oh.
lot.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's. the
Well,
kind of
and I say-
concept of-
Looking at, we have 3 R1 neighborhoods, right? One is protected by an HOA, one was supposed to be protected by an HOA, and the other one is just older. I can tell you you could put it up for a vote and every single one of those R1s is gonna say, absolutely not, I do not want a townhouse or anything in my neighborhood. And they would riot, because people bought in those R1 districts because they like the larger lots and they like having the single family homes. I live in an R1, I moved from an R2 to an R1.
Okay, but let's say, for example, the 3 or 4 big tracts next to Woodland Manor and Southern Fields, they're not developed yet. Are we saying we only want that type of development pattern to continue? Or are we
No.
saying we're gonna encourage potentially a more diverse housing type and profile in
Or
those larger?
Or R2.
Well, it could be a whole separate category. But that's the point is, with these vacant lands that we do have going forward, which we all know they're gonna be developed in the next 20 years, do we want to encourage a more diverse profile of housing? Or are we saying, no, it's gonna be large lots, single family residential only, because that's the way it is, and that's all we want?
Do we create an R4? An
Good.
R4 that helps people, who move into a neighborhood assuming a certain kind of neighborhood, like of housing stock, and that's what they wanted, and not changing that. And whereas newer developments, some large lot redevelopment is an entirely new category altogether.
Yeah, and you could create a broad PUD type, plan unit development type zoning ordinance, or this redevelopment overlay ordinance that we already have on the books that suggests we encourage a variety and a lot of different design options that we will consider. Excuse me, it's already in the zoning code to allow something like that, but you know, whether it's applied to those parcels yet or not, that's another question.
The T3 is essentially R1.
So this is,
This is a tough one.
It's only tough if you make it tough, because you're just saying. None of this in R1, none of this in R2, it has to be very straightforward, and I mean, from the trend is going on in the community now.
so this is our current, two thousand
For the
three.
price of land, you know, they're looking at townhouses. As much as they can,
Well, and I don't disagree, but like also like,
I think I'm from a different, background, so.
This is,
We have the townhouse, we have single family, not single family, the townhouse was thrown in the middle and big recreation centers in the center of the whole thing, it was great. Cause you know, somebody says, I don't want a house, I don't want a yard, I want to, you know, I
Yeah.
don't want those things. If I do, they have a little bit of yard, it's the size of a postage stamp, HOA comes along and does their thing, or, you know, it's just for somebody that's not interested in, having a yard. I've got kids, I don't want a new yard work.
we'll start-
But I have the feeling of having a home rather than an apartment or a condo.
I was talking to a real estate rental property manager yesterday, and she said there's such a demand for one unit apartments, one unit dwelling units, one unit places in this community that for young people in or elderly, that they don't need a
Yeah.
big house, big
That's
apartment.
probably, I know. They're scratching people's eyes up to get one bedroom down, you know, units up on the north end.
Mhm.
So everything's, you know, a two.
So this map here is from the 2014 land use plan that provided some direction on these vacant parcels that we do have in the city. I circled some of the category or some of the areas that I think warrant future direction on. For example, in our downtown B1 zoning district, which crosses into the R2 zoning category, I think we've got several properties that are in the B1 zoning district that are actually older single-family residential units that are, I believe, are miszoned. For example, the house that burnt down on 305 Second Street and the block going further west are in a B1 zoning category. I don't know why they got put in that category, but for example, they're now non-conforming uses. They would not be allowed to be rebuilt unless they go through some zoning map amendment. So there's some minor corrections within our B1 central business district that I think warrant looking at in terms of both the zoning and or land use plan that I just want to bring to your attention.
so I guess where I go with this, I disagree and believe that that was intentional, as in, if that home were to burn down, the intention was that would be, more business space, because our B1 was so restricted in the area that if there is an opportunity to expand it, then it should be expanded. Because otherwise, you know, if that house, where that house is across from the armory, if that becomes another residence again, then your B1 can only grow so big. But if that B1 zoning is enforced, and you can only put business there now, that will be in character with the planned redevelopment of the armory block and give more business space, for expansion. Then that goes into this transact zoning, right? Like, could that be a mixed use space? Could the armory block be a mixed use space?
Well, that's a good point. You know, what direction do we want to go in that?
Why did he go as a single family?
He didn't. He was just remodeled. So that one doesn't have like,
He's zone
It's
B1.
always been single family.
The one that burned down was always a single family.
Prior to
Yeah.
him rehabbing it, it was a single family?
So you could be grandfathered in that case. It's not like the multifamily.
No,
issue,
once it's
right?
gone, you gotta
No,
go.
but
Yeah.
while it's still stood, right?
Yeah.
Like he could still maintain it as a home as long as it was a home and
Correct.
there's no 6-month rule on that.
Right, right. So, yeah, there's like 4 or 5, 6, 8 parcels right around that area that I think need to be looked at. You know, one argument is that we've got abundant city-owned properties right now, including the Armory, including 4 or 5 parcels that the city owns next to the Armory. And some are still brownfield situations that we do have to address, but they're available for redevelopment. In what direction do we want to go with those parcels? Should they be institutional, residential, commercial? So this is what the land use plan should probably get some guidance to.
All right, so I take back some of my harsh criticism of the transaction. It sounds-
So some of the other key areas I just want to mention,
No, and it plays into some of the challenges of, I mean, especially when you contrast it with this, the way the B1 is so interspersed in R2. Essentially what it's doing is it's chunking them together, right? And allowing both uses within to coexist.
where are you talking about?
So like, look at this land use plan, right? Like you got the B1 and the R2 are all like, I mean, it's like you just splattered them all down and they're all interspersed, whereas the transact zoning allows that entire area to be either one. So like the area can grow and change to the needs of whether more business or more residential as you redevelop it versus being so strict. And that doesn't sound terrible. And it also I guess it would, I mean, the way this plan does is allowing you to do multifamily in every transact zoning, which I'm not gonna touch that right in a second, but the T2, if you were to limit maybe multifamily within the T2, new construction multifamily, not cutting up single family homes, but maybe allow duplexes or townhomes in the T2, that would increase the density overall.
And
And
what's your one townhouse in T2?
right here,
I know.
Yeah.
Why would you?
we're doing it
Oh, in the T2, sorry.
in T2.
Sorry,
Yes,
sorry.
T2.
I was,
Yeah, that's what he's advocating.
yeah.
More
Yeah.
flexibility in the T2 or R2 if you want to.
No, I don't think you should put townhouses out in the T3, even though it's saying you should. Or even the T4, obviously.
So where's the T1 then? Are you sure you're not talking about the T1 there?
In the central.
You know what? I can't tell the difference between the two on this map because they're both orange.
But I wonder if
See
they
that?
kind of spotted in there too. I don't see the orange anywhere else.
Yeah, well, T1 and T2 together is what I'm calling
Oh, I
it.
see, it's just a shade lighter, but I see it,
That was not good.
yeah. And that again is sort of blah, you know, it just, because it's,
But the T2 still has, single family homes and some apartments, generally within walking distance of downtown. 2-story homes with mixed, see, but I don't know that I agree with apartments so much as like
Yeah.
townhomes or duplexes, that kind of thing.
it's, again, it's pretty spotty when you really get into.
The T1 allows the public and institutional uses where the T2 does not.
Yeah, that would have to be tweaked because when you look at it and you see the shade difference and it's hard to see. It reminds me of the voting districts where it's one district on one side of the road and another district on the other side of the road. That's what this reminds me of as would have to really be narrowed down. And just as the original one was done way back,
Mhm.
2010, 2014, yeah.
I mean, it's not even that radical, really. I mean, the T1 is B1. The T2 is, a lot of the R2 is changing the boundary of R2.
Mhm.
And then
It just had to be tweaked a little bit.
the T4 is not even solid, the T4 is not even solidly R1, like the R1 is in both the T3 and the T4. But it's more defining it by like proximity to the core of the city, which would be the downtown, as opposed to the kind of patchwork that we have now. But
Yeah, and that's a fact.
So I think the direction is that we kind of support the idea of reconfiguring these districts to match it more similar to the conditions that are there. But take a very careful look at the suggested land uses. that are-
User friendly,
Sorry, what?
I think it's more user friendly
In terms of,
And
in terms of the map, you mean? Yeah,
You even need to call it this transect zoning though. I mean, it seems like there's pretty,
well, we're getting it's like me, I find.
well, I mean, there's pretty close correlation with our existing zones rather than totally renaming it. I mean,
Yeah, other than a little tweak here. and there, but
keep in mind,
look at the-
they're
look at
eliminating,
the original stuff, but Lord, it is.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
keep in mind, they eliminate the R3 zoning category, the multifamily zoning district. So that is a decision that then you have to make is how do you want to handle other than single-family development in these different transects?
where do you allow apartment buildings essentially? Because this is gonna let it be anywhere.
Right. So we can work with that
That
and
was all.
come up with some ideas.
2015.
Well, no, the apartment buildings are allowed in the R3 with the 2014. But this one's saying you can put apartments just about anywhere, other than maybe, no, not even, is allowing it in the T4 suburban?
Hmm.
Are they allowing apartment buildings in the T4?
Yeah, they
suburban?
suggest to allow diverse housing stock in that category as well.
Think, we'd get a riot. Sitting, put apartment in right now.
I'm good.
Let me just talk about a few other areas, just to point out in the discussion area map, if I may. For example, along Market Street Extended, before you get to the old Virginia Road, there's some misclassification of properties. For example, the Monument Building House, Delia's Closet.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's in a residential category, and should that be in a business type category? Part of Cedar Run, Cedar Point subdivision has got accidentally put into a commercial land use and zoning designation apparently. Then we have the
He's addressed it
situation.
here.
Hmm?
In the new plan, he's already addressed it. Like, I mean, he's already got it classified appropriately, right?
Yeah, if you go by that transect map.
Yeah.
Then there's a situation with the land use along Market Street Extended that was subject to the speculation about rezoning it to residential and multifamily. You know, that shows it partially zoned or designated as commercial and residential.
That's important too, because that's something, you know, as we were contemplating the case, and I guess because the case was withdrawn. Without going into specifics, I had a concern there with, I know that people were very concerned about what's gonna be in their backyard, right? Like, obviously there was a lot out there on social media and everything. Obviously the case has been withdrawn, but I don't know, you know, if somebody proposed what is currently a business use there, I don't know that anybody in that neighborhood, which is a very nice residential neighborhood, would want a business use in their backyard.
Yeah, it sounds like they're gonna have to adjust to something, and in their eyes, what's the worst of two evils?
It's a nice, quiet
You know, do
neighborhood.
they want, and I said that from the beginning, I said, boy, you wanna look at a loading dock and a tractor trailer coming in there at 6 o'clock in the morning?
So
Or
that
you
land
want
use,
something that's residential, even though like, you know, could be townhouses, could be single family homes, could be, apartments.
so he kind of addresses that with the Transact by making it a fringe neighborhood, a T3, right? Like, so,
I think it's an obvious answer.
well, you can make it R3.
It's not all fringe, some of it's commercial.
Yeah,
I think the next, the parcel next to the
I think.
the propane place still looks like it's in a commercial designation, but
and you can't put, I mean, you need it needs to be a transitional zone because you have that, right next to a shopping mall. So I mean, the only other precedent in town would be like the Clark Manor Apartments, right? That's an R3 adjacent to, a B2. It's a transition between an R2 and a B2. And that's what needs to be here. You should avoid for a large scale development having an R2 directly adjacent to a B2, I think. There needs to be some kind of transition there. And that should be defined in our land use.
well, that's kind of the whole point why he's suggesting this transect zoning. You get away from these strict
Yeah.
transitional zone categories.
I think I like the transit zoning in theory, but the definitions need some work because the way that we implement them, the missing middle needs to be
Is this
very
written in
careful.
stone? No, that you could tweak it along the way and make it more feasible, make it more.
The map, I like the map, but when I look and read through the definition, conditions, that's where I have some serious concerns.
I don't understand why this is range and this is suburban.
Why what?
Was it Little Manor and what's the other one? We just,
Southern Village.
Southern Village. Why are there two different zones? They're the same thing.
So I really, yes, they are now. They're both R2 now.
Why are they, why do they have to
So-
go right here?
If I'm looking at this, I think, and I haven't been able to read this transit coding in as much detail as I'd like to, but I think it looks like the intent to me is it's a proximity to the core. So the farther you get from the core, the T1, the more, I don't know, it's less dense. What's the opposite of dense? It gets, so a suburban zone, the suburban zones are being designed to be the farthest from the core. And as you get closer, you move into the French neighborhoods. And it looks to be, correct me if I'm wrong, driving density. Densest area of the town at the core of the town. And the farther you get from the core of the town, the less dense you allow the development to be. So suburban being the least dense
That's a good translation.
of
You basically allow Little Manor when they tore down and have a high density residential.
And that goes into talking about best use of your existing infrastructure, because all the streets and most of your streets and sidewalks are in the core, right? The farther you get from the core of town, the less sidewalks you have, the less infrastructure you have. So you want to encourage the highest density development at the core of your city where the most infrastructure is, so you get the most bang for your buck of your existing infrastructure. And as you sprawl, you get into the T4, then your infrastructure costs are disproportionate to the investment in the area, right? Like a suburban area, you're spending a lot of money on the road per tax dollar, right? Like you've got one house on 1,000-foot road that you have to maintain that 1,000-foot road from one property tax bill, essentially, versus when you go really dense in the center of town, you got like in front of your business, right? You have what, 30 feet of road, versus how many businesses are using that small piece of road? It's a much better use of limited city revenue to increase density. Sorry, that was a rant.
Yeah. I think there's an opportunity to recognize those existing type of large lot developments such as Southern Fields, Woodland Manor in one category, and then for these vacant large lot developable parcels, they could be designated as a separate category, which leads me to my next point about this discussion area. For example, the 74-acre tract that the city owns, the direction from the mayor and council is that they would like to initiate a mixed-use overlay type zoning application on that parcel. So this could be coming up to the planning commission for consideration next month.
That next month, you said?
Mhm.
So is that, where does that fit into like our comprehensive plan essentially? Like,
Well, right now, it's designated partly industrial, mostly industrial, and a small sliver of B2. It's right next to the scrimmager track
Yeah.
that's zone B2. And
He's not accounting, so that floating development, which is what we're talking about, which is existing
overlay
city code,
development,
that isn't even discussed here in this land use plan. Which,
No.
that seems to me a very valuable tool to have that we have not utilized.
yeah, that's my point, is that we could call that this overlay district and still use these other transit type new designated areas.
But I mean, shouldn't the consultant be incorporating that concept into our land use plan if we intend to continue using that concept?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So there's other parcels, for example, that could fit into that same category, including some just outside our city limits. For example, the large parcel across from the high school. You know, it's never been developed. It's a prime parcel. I don't know the intentions of the property owners. I don't want to speak for them, for example. That's along Old Virginia Road across from the Southern Fields development. You know, there was speculation in the county plan about whether that should be designated a growth area, and so forth. So
It's not currently within city limits, that area.
that's correct. That's correct.
It's surrounded on 3 sides by the city. It would definitely be a target for
Yeah.
annexation.
Could be a logical area for industrial, could be a logical area for mixed-use development, could be a logical area for an expansion of the school system. You know, there's many different options there, but. So moving on, a couple other quick categories. For example, the Wawa Stockton Road site. isn't really recognized in our plan. It's not even annexed. A large area north of Jenkins Orchard was speculated at one time to be considered for residential development. I think that's basically it.
Surrounding the YMCA,
Sorry, what?
that's all surrounding the YMCA, correct? Yeah, so isn't that all owned by the YMCA?
It's between the YMCA and Jenkins Orchard,
Okay, it's currently agricultural.
going up the
thing.
Bird Road, I believe.
Yeah, there's like a large farm there, I think.
So this map here is, for example, what the county has put together and to share with you, currently under review and discussion.
So this map here shows draft growth areas, has it affects and relates to the areas just outside the Pocomoke City corporate limits. And it shows the 2006 growth area map that the county had in their comprehensive plan. And then they're showing the 2025 growth area map that picks up these additional areas next to our corporate limits. For example, the one I just mentioned across from the elementary school is designated as a growth area in their draft plan. Further large areas along Ocean Highway as you approach the Virginia border are picked up and added as future growth areas. The Stockton Road area is recognized. Areas between Jenkins Orchard and the YMCA, for example, are identified as a potential growth area. So I think they make sense. For example, also the area off McMichael's Road, some of those areas that may have water and sewer services to them now, may or may not be annexed, could be considered growth areas. I think they're logical. There's not a specific land use designation for those that I know of at this point. But they could be considered that they could be annexed and brought into the city as something over the next 25 years, for example.
Makes sense.
That's all I have to present tonight. I would encourage you to look at the community profile, look at the land use element, bring back any feedback. Made a lot of good points. I think we've got some sense of direction. And I can get back to the consultant and say, this is the direction I think, what I've heard, that we want to go in and ask for some changes.
I'd say especially that community program, it's not that we're asking him to, essentially, we're not really asking for propaganda, right? Like, we're not asking to paint an unfairly rosy picture. But there is a good picture here, and the way that it's being presented is not fair to us, I think, as a city, and for someone who, you know, the comprehensive plan, who's the audience of the comprehensive plan, right?
I think because it's very generalized.
So that is a very critical.
If that's how they do it, that's fine for larger areas, but it becomes really unfair for the small.
Yeah, I certainly think there's a positive story to be told, other than just comparing us to the county and the state.
And I think not only about my own, you know, hesitation about the transect zoning, but as far as, you know, what can we accomplish in the community? Because we're making a plan that we want the community to support and accept, right? I really think that it's important. You know, if you try to throw a completely radical rewrite at people, that's not, I don't think it's going to be received well. I think, you know, inherently, people are going to push back. But if you're able to tie it better in, even if it tie better into our existing zoning classifications and better define how this benefits the community now to essentially do it's not quite a comprehensive rezone. Like, I mean, but it really is kind of requesting a comprehensive rezone. I mean, it's not terribly different when you really study it, but it needs to be digestible to the people of our community as not terribly different. And also make sure it doesn't, you know, you don't want to throw a radical change on the community for no reason.
Well, I think it does support some things we've also talked about, such as
Yes.
looking into accessory dwelling units. was the other one that just came to mind?
So if he could maybe do a better review of our existing zoning, and incorporate these concepts. So like this map, I like this map, like, and I think
That's so much cleaner.
this map is great. So how can we maybe grow and modify our existing zoning to fit this concept? So like the T1, to me, the T1 is B1, the T2 is R2. The T3 and T4 have elements of R1.
R3 or R4, R1? Mhm.
Yeah, and then the SDC is essentially existing B2, with some modification, and the SDI is essentially the, industrial zone. So how can we utilize our existing zoning and pull in some flexibilities that are suggested that can improve growth without presenting this completely radical change? And I think that can be done. The biggest challenge being how do we responsibly incorporate the concepts of the R3 into the entire thing? But I think if you utilize the B1, R2, R1, B2, like utilize our existing zoning model and modify it rather than presenting a completely new zoning model, I think it'll be received a lot better, not only by the public, but by the council, because I don't know that the council will want to accept a completely
Yeah.
radical
Yeah,
change.
I agree. I don't think we need a radical change in a whole different category of zoning districts and stuff.
Simplicity of it.
Yeah.
You won the board is pretty easy to remember.
Okay. I think we're still scheduled to meet in May, both on the third Wednesday, and if you want to schedule an additional work session, we have more elements to go through. So is that the plan? Keep our fourth Wednesday as a work session?
I think,
That's okay with you?
as far as making sure we keep some, because I don't think, I mean, this meeting was advertised properly, but I don't think many people were aware of it, right? Because nobody's here. And we want people to be here and be a part of it.
Why do you say it wasn't advertised properly?
No, I said was.
Oh, okay.
It was. But I would like to see us improve engagement. I'm only allowed to, as our legal counsel, I'm only allowed to put out there what is agreed upon by you and Ms. Stafford going out there. I would like to be able to push some of this out, more through my avenues too, of the drafts that we're allowing. So work on getting those out more in advance, because I don't like that nobody's here other than city officials, right? I want the community to be a part of this. I want the community involved and engaged. I think that helps us in the long run too, when we present the final plan.
See, I thought that we were gonna have,
Yeah,
a night
He's
where
contractually
we are
obligated.
inviting, the public and.
Well, he's committed to having two public meetings, public formats, in addition to, I think, two public hearings on the document.
that's gonna be late stage though, right? That's gonna be towards the end of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's worthwhile for him to come up, for example, at these work sessions and go over these details. Maybe do it by Zoom, but it's an idea.
So I guess maybe I can engage with you guys better too, like we agreed that, hey, these drafts need to go to the public, then, say, hey, on the website, okay, and then I'll get them out there too, and help get the public more engaged. Cause I would like to see more people out sitting out there, I guess.
Sure, we all would.
Oh, especially on that,
This is
yeah,
this is the future of our community.
yeah, and everybody, I mean, just as tonight, everybody's got their own ideas, translations and definitions and so. And that's what we have out there, and everybody just needs to come together and mash it all together. On the next planning and zoning, meeting, we are gonna have the, rezoning of the 74.
We're gonna have to propose, and you all have to vote on it.
Right, that's the topic,
Yeah.
that's the topic.
Floating over-
And what
Floating
is,
overlay zone, is that what it's called? What's the title? Floating overlay zone?
Yeah. Change in zoning for that city on property.
and, what about the topic of going from the 12 months to the 6 months on, development? Rather than having agreed.
You're talking about going from 12 months to someone, for demolition or anything like that.
Yeah, if we were trying to eliminate the stagnation of,
Well, then they're just gonna apply for it.
a property
Yeah.
that is,
So like
right now it's at 12 months.
Yeah.
That you have to either, I believe it's commence,
Mm-hmm.
work on it, and now, I think Borough Council are more inclined to go with something along the lines of 6 months.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the International Building Code says 6 months, or city code says a year, so there's a conflict there, you know, we probably
Can we
should.
get that on the, agenda as well?
Well, we don't have to do that, right? Wouldn't that be mayor and council?
We have to draw something up. Planning
Not on
zoning.
that topic yet,
Huh?
not on that specific topic yet. There's been other topics that have been brought up that we need to look at as well, so we can roll in some draft changes and have them for your review at the next meeting. We talked about neighborhood compatibility ordinance, there's a topic that came up about boarding rooms. Council wants addressed, we talked about, accessory dwelling units, we talked about possibly changing and lowering the square footage of, our single-family dwelling unit, living area requirement. We talked about several topics that we can all roll into one potential change.
All right, I'll let it know.
Okay?
Everybody ready to go home? Go home? Go home? And we got money for it.
We don't have, we're a work session, so how do you close a work session? Cause you don't do a motion, right? We just say we're done? And then
That's it.
it's-
That's now, I think. Thank you. Thank you.